Welcome back. This is Pair 12 Knitting. I'm Jennifer, and this is a knitting podcast all about knitting, yarny adventures, and travel. Thank you very much for joining me today. So excited that you're here. We're going to be sitting down and chatting all about my favorite things in this episode in particular, my favorite knitting podcasts. I hope you enjoy. Some maybe you watch, some may be completely new for you. So let's get comfy, let's get cozy, we'll get right in. What I'm wearing, I am wearing a mishmash of an inspiration of a micro shawl that couples the Sophie shawl or scarf by Petite and the bandana by Aimée. I didn't use the pattern, but used inspiration, putting those two together and created this. It's a one skein wonder. I'm pretty happy with it, and it's crying out spring to me. So there we are. We're now gonna get into my favorite knitting podcasts. So what I've done is I've classified my favorite knitting podcasts into 5 categories. We have Chatty podcasts, we have how-to podcasts, so these are like helpful videos. Then we have informative podcasts, beautiful knits and story podcasts, and we wrap up with inspiration podcasts. I'm so excited to be sharing my very first favorite podcast. This is one I think I've watched the longest since I started knitting, and there's a couple in here you're gonna see that they have been with me since the beginning of my knitting podcast journey, and my enjoyment of watching. The first is the Grocery Girls. These are 2 sisters that come to us from Alberta, and they have been crafting and knitting for forever. They are definitely, icons, I feel, in the knitting world, and they have always had a presence with social media, with YouTube, as far as I know, and they are definitely the gurus of knitting and chatting about knitting and showing us about knitting. They are a super chatty couple in front of the camera. They are lovely. They talk about everything from literally like nuts to bolts, like knits, their favorite things that they're watching, that they're doing, personal interests. It is just a joy to watch. These are definitely longer episodes. You're looking at 2, sometimes 3 hours. They do a really unique way of presenting their information, and that they will film live. And so if you're available on the day that these 2 ladies are filming, you can have the thrill of watching them, from the comfort of your own home, from where they're coming from, and chatting, doing the little live chats on the side, which is cool. I've had the opportunity to join a couple times when I had my sabbatical year, which was lovely. If you were not available during those live chats, of course, they post the live stream after, and so you can enjoy it after. It's such a good time. I feel like a part, I feel like in this little friendship with them on screen, and I'm sure you will too if you haven't already done so to check them out. So that's the Grocery Girls with Tracy and Jody. Next up on a Chatty podcast, and this is indeed, we have 2 other Canadian people coming at you, knitters Jackie and Carmen. This is from Knitting a Good Yarn. These 2 lovely ladies come to us from southwestern Ontario, and there's always a lot going on with them. They film out of one of the houses, and the 2 get together and get to share all of their makes, including hand spinning. Jackie hand spins as well, so she makes her own yarn, which is amazing, and produces enough quantity, which I am so amazed at, to make garments, to knit garments. Both beautiful knitters, her and Carmen. There's always a puppy or 2 or 3 involved in the mishmash of their sharing, and you can tell they have an awesome time as they're sharing with each other about their knits. They like to show them on their bodies and model them, and then Jackie will give her garment to Carmen to try on, and they do a switch so you can see. It's just, I love it. Again, it's a cozy feel. It's a very friendly feel. They do it in one shot. They don't edit their videos and cut out different like noises and actions and things. So you really feel like you're with them at the time that they're filming. They knit gorgeous items, like I said. And yeah, knitting a good yarn. Go check it out with Carmen and Jackie. That's very chatty, and that can last for up to 3 hours as well. Now we have the how-to section. So these videos I have used umpteen times to assist me in my knitting, to try to get me out of a pickle, fix my work, or to find out how to do something new to me or something that I forget. These two are brilliant podcasts, and it's like having a knitting expert with you as far as I'm concerned, as you're watching without a knitter present in your life, if that's the case, or living with you. So my first pick for this is Very Pink Knits. This is with Stacy. She is a pro star knitter for sure. And what I love about her videos, so she has tons of how-to videos that she uses the camera, of course, very close up on her work as she's working in real time. She has also like different options of like slowed down versions of her how-to videos. She often repeats the same technique a few times, so you can also follow it that way. But I love, love, love that her videos are concise. She intros a video to say what she's going to do, what the how-to basically is about, or the technique, and then she implements it right away. There is no big, discussion before where you're having to fast forward. And I find that quite, if I'm in a project and I want to get on the move, these are the style of videos that super resonate with me. I really enjoy that. So I highly recommend Very Pink Knits for knitting help, tutorial, technique, that kind of thing. Next up on how to is with Susan Bryan. She is knitting with Susan Bryan, super expert knitter. And again, her how-to videos are amazing. I find I really enjoy her comparisons. She will do technique videos of one type of knitting technique, I'll say, or thing, stitch, but she'll show different ways. And depending on what you're after on your finished object or your fabric, she will explain which technique could look or work better on one opposed to the other. So I find she really holds your hand, not only sharing information with you and guide you, but help you make a decision as to what technique would be best for your end product, or exactly like what you're looking for, how you're going to apply that technique. So Susan Bryan, knitting with Susan Bryan, she's amazing. And you probably know that. And if you don't, go check her out. Informative knitting. So this is what I'm calling kind of like uber passionate knitting and knitting sharing. That is so obviously to me, Fruity Knitting. This is a gorgeous, I would say, professional podcast that comes from Andrea and Madeline. They are a mother-daughter team that are Australian but live in Germany. The series, the channel was originally started with husband-wife, with Andrea and Andrew. And Andrew passed away. And now it is Andrea and Madeline, and it is a stunning podcast. They go through their knitting, so their whips and their FOs, which are always gorgeous masterpieces of work. But they do so much more. They interview everything from knitwear designers. They go to farms. They find out, different artists, different, what's it called? Festivals. They are so active in knitting community. This is their livelihood. This is their passion. This is their work. This is their career choice. And it definitely shows. Their what's it called? Videography skills, of course, are amazing. Super polished, edited work. And with that, yes, it's on YouTube, but they also offer different levels of Patreon or paid component as well to their channel, which is very deserving and worthy of. I really enjoy watching. I find not only is it inspirational, but it's so informative, and it always goes above and beyond each episode. They're about an hour, I believe, episode that come out monthly, and they're joy to watch. So go check that out if you haven't. My next category is beautiful knits and story, or beautiful story. So these have to go to, I have two in the running for this category. The first is Fiber Tales with Lark. This is a really beautiful, I would call it like a slow podcast, which I enjoy, definitely when I'm in the mood for. There's a lot of beautiful, visual that comes out of this. Very, garden, forest, nature, which is so lovely to see. Lark lives on an island, I believe it's outside of Denmark, if I'm not mistaken. I hope I'm not. And it's a peaceful podcast, of course inspirational, and I believe this is where she probably gets a lot of her inspiration for her knit design. She's a knitwear designer as well. I really enjoy, it's a pleasure to watch this podcast. Another podcast I really enjoy of the same category is by Gille. She is from Danish Musings. She started out, from my understanding, with a channel that she shared about Denmark and the beautiful pieces of Denmark visually that really inspired her to start a YouTube channel. From there, she started dabbling. I remember watching her very first knitting podcast channel because she's also a knitter, and it was just so lovely to see. She really enjoys what I think people are calling, the neutral palette. I believe she's disagreed in the past, saying not all of her knits are neutral, and they're not. She's gone down, brighter colors, which is great, and her style is really lovely. I think it's, it's a different side of the coin too, where living outside of Canada, outside of North America, we're getting different inspiration from different places of the world. And so it has this really, again, beautiful, and I would call it like a slower, peaceful watch. And that's incorporated into, of course, her style, her aesthetic, and her knitting garment choice, which I really enjoy. So go check that out. That's Danish Musings by Gille. My last and final category is inspiration. I find, with the knitters and the podcasters I'm going to be sharing about, I watch for different reasons. These I find all very inspiring, and so I hope you enjoy this as well. My first up, this is the tried and true knitting podcast for me as well in this category, is Knitting Traditions by Inga. My heart just bursts every time there's a new episode that she posts. She lives on the west coast of Norway, and again, just really beautiful knitter. Knits all the time. I swear sometimes she must have like 10 hands that she's knitting with, because there's always such a rainbow of objects that she's finished or she's knitting on. She's always got a lot on the go, and I really enjoy the way that she shares. She's very open about her knitting process and how her whips are going. She explains the modifications pretty well. So I've watched her forever. I really enjoy her. She's fun. And I feel like a lot of her, either her knitwear choices or her patterns that she, that resonate with her, and her yarn choices, I also really enjoy that aesthetic or that yarn pairing of. She's a big fan of rustic yarn, and that has my heart. And yeah, I feel just resonates with me a lot. So that's Inga from Knitting Traditions. The next under the inspirational category is Wool and Vine with Kristen. This is a knitting podcast where Kristen is a hand dyer of yarn, but dabbles in everything. She is, knitter, crafter. She does beading. She's recently started weaving. It's like candy for the eyes and the ears, because I really love to hear that people are just like, they're not just doing one thing, they're doing all these other things. I find that crazy inspiring. I enjoy her color sense too, the combinations of colors that she puts together with, for example, color work, or even her color choices of the things she's actually making is lovely, and it's a good time. She's got a really unique personality that comes off on screen as well, and I super enjoy it. So that's Wool and Vine with Kristen. Next up is High Fiber Knits with Emily. I enjoy Emily. I'm in Toronto, she is as well, and we get together, in my opinion, not enough, to do different like knitting moments and events. We hit it off years ago, and I feel like she's such a good human. I enjoy obviously being with her and spending quality time in person with her, and in the times I can, I enjoy watching her on screen. She shares, again, such lovely and detailed progress of how her knitting's going with her whips. She's really honest about her finished objects and how that goes with her yarn pairing, with the pattern. So I really enjoy watching her. She's a great time. That's High Fiber Knits with Emily. My next up is another Canadian. She is Leanne with the knitting podcast named Knitty Stew. She's a delight. I feel like in my mind, I feel like I was one of the first 100 people that came across her very first episode. It popped up on my recommendations, like that feed that you get on your main screen. So I clicked on it. I thought Knitty Stew interesting. She's a knitter, passion, and in her free time, of course, but she's also a stewardess for an airline, Canadian airline. And so her whole knitting podcast channel is her bringing her knits to wherever she goes on her flight. She really links in that travel component, which is obviously totally enjoyable for me, because she shares about her experience in that city or town or whatever it is. She usually tries to do something yarny. So going to, for example, like a yarn shop, shares about that. It's a great time. She does a lot of color work. I love that. Good color choices, good color combos. She also does quite a bit of accessories. I think her main go-to from what I've seen, and maybe, I don't know, I hope this is she would also say this is correct, is hats. She's a big hat knitter, so that's always fun to watch too. And yeah, she's started spinning. I mean, again, I feel people, they're so multifaceted and not one-dimensional. So it's really nice to hear knitters I find in their podcasts talk about other things that they're kind of dipping their hands into. So that's the Knitty Stew with Leanne. The next knitting podcast that I want to talk to you about is AK Nora Knits. She is a dynamo of a knitter and also a podcaster. They are full stories about her knitting process from cast on to cast off. She's fabulous at rounding up her final costs, which is amazing, and her editing skills are next level for a knitting podcast. Go check out, if you haven't already, AK Nora Knits. My last step for today and for the inspirational category is Brooke Willow Knits. This is with Anna, and she is coming from the US to talk about her makes. She primarily in this podcast does talk about her knitting. Love what she knits. It's always fun. She knits really, I would say, in my opinion, different designers, not you know, always the typical, not the stuff that we're seeing consistently, perhaps like being thrown out from Instagram. But, you know, maybe unique designers or coming up with interesting yarn pairings as well with I'm careful with how I say like commercial yarn, but maybe more unique yarn choices and super hyper commercial yarn, which is amazing. She's also a sewist, so she ties in what she's making with her sewing, and she'll talk about and showcase her sewn finished objects as well, which I find I'm loving. And I'm starting to get a little bit back into sewing, so I really enjoy that combination of makes that people are doing that are knitting and sewing. As we get into the warmer months, this is where I want to go. That's Brick Willow Knits by Anna. I really enjoyed putting together the list of my favorite knitting podcasts with you today. I definitely, there are so many more knitting podcasts that I enjoy and watch myself that I feel like I almost could make a part 2, probably a part 3. But I feel this is, you know, this is just the dabble, just the beginning. Let me know what you watch. Are these knitting podcasts that maybe have come to your mind and your feed already? Are there completely new ones? And are there any of your absolute favorite podcasts that I missed? If so, please let me know in the comments. Let our knitting community know so we can all enjoy and get some more fun knitting passion coming out and some more inspiration. With that being said, if you enjoyed this video and others like it, I very much invite you to like and subscribe to the channel. If you want to dabble a little further, I've set up a Ko-Fi account where you can send a donation. And of course, I have my knitting patterns. They're all linked in below, along with all the links for the different channels today that you'll find in the show notes. I will leave it there. I wish you the best joy in your knitting today and also your knitting podcast watching. Until next time, take care.